Welcome to an incredible video where I'm going to teach you 5 brutal traps in the King's Gambit. The King's Gambit is this move: e4, e5, f4. Check out how unusual this move is. You're going to be amazed by the checkmates we have in this variation. Notice that this variation isn't very popular, but even elite players with over 2500 elo win with this gambit. Notice that this first trap I'm going to show you comes from a game between a 2500 and a 2600, and the higher rated player falls into the trap. You're going to see that it's spectacular. So, chess teacher, what happens when they take this pawn here? Well, the first trap happens precisely when they accept this gambit. We'll calmly play knight to f3, and notice that this move stopped being played, so to speak. Why? Because black had a brutal plan, which was to push this pawn to g5, defended by the queen, and threatening g4 to drive away the knight, and then bring the queen over here to give a check. Therefore, white often stopped playing the King's Gambit because of this idea. But the thing is, here we have a spectacular trap. We'll bring out the other knight. Notice that it seems like we're not threatening anything. And we're allowing black to carry out their plan, and push their pawn to g4 without any problem. But here, we're going to continue with our trap. They're attacking this knight, so we're going to pull it back right here to e5. And it's true that we're giving up the best square for the queen to check us, and it looks like black has won anyway here. But actually, we have a super powerful resource. Let's take a moment to analyze this situation. Black has a brutal attack. Look, they're checking our king. Obviously, we don't want to move it, because if we do, we're left in a terrible position. Plus, we lose castling rights, block our bishop, block our queen, and lose all attacking chances. And the other move, which would be g3, also seems very disastrous, because after the exchanges, notice that we couldn't recapture since we'd lose the rook. And we also couldn't just do nothing, because on the next move, they push the pawn, giving a discovered check. And they capture the rook, promoting to an extra queen. So here, after playing g3, it seems like we're completely lost. But that's not the case. We're going to play g3, and after our opponent captures, we have a little trick that's not so little. You're gonna love it. It's queen takes pawn. Let's analyze this queen takes pawn move. What happens if black accepts the queen exchange? Well, then we'd be left with a super advantageous position. Advantageous. Luck. Now, besides having good development, we have both knights active, we can castle long, and all the dangers would be gone. But of course, what happens then? Here, white doesn't have to exchange queens. They can say, wait, I have a spectacular idea here. Just look at this. It's spectacular. Why? Because they sacrifice the queen with this move. Sorry, it's actually like this. I know I'll see comments from everyone saying I had it the other way around. So I'll set it up correctly now. They have this spectacular move, a discovered check, sacrificing the queen. And what's black's idea? That after capturing the queen, they get it back by taking the rook, so they end up with a clean extra rook. Notice that here it looks like black is completely winning, but that's not the case. The ones who are actually completely winning are us. Here, the star move is the following. Queen to h5. A simple queen move, which threatens a completely unstoppable checkmate. Notice that now we're threatening checkmate with both the knight and the queen, and black can't do anything to stop it. It seems like the only defensive move is this one here, but with a move as simple as d4, we'd be threatening bishop takes knight, and this knight is going to fall on the next move, with no one left to defend this square. Therefore, this move doesn't work. In the game between the two grandmasters, bishop to e7 was played. Why was bishop to e7 played? Because, let's see, if we capture with the queen now, the king would escape this way, and notice that there's no possible follow-up. What happens here is that we shouldn't capture with the queen, but instead play the brilliant move, knight takes pawn, knight takes f7, threatening extremely dangerous discovered attacks with the knight. What happens here is that black still thought they could save themselves with this move. Notice that now they're attacking our queen. If we moved her, say, here, they'd take our knight. And we'd be down a rook and a knight, so we'd be completely lost. But, as I said, we win with this double discovered check. You see, we're giving check with the queen, check with the knight, when there's a double check. The only solution is to move the king. Why? Because you can't block or capture both checks at the same time. So you have to move to one of two squares, this one or this one. If he comes here, checkmate. And if he comes here, the checkmate is spectacular. We sacrifice the queen for the second time in this game. We bring her in here, and when they capture her with the rook or the knight, it's checkmate. Notice that if they take her with the knight, the spectacular checkmate also happens. Why? Because we've trapped the king among his own pieces, and now, just with the knight, we deliver checkmate. And this was only the first trap. I hope you're loving this. Leave me a big like, and let's go for the second one, which is just as spectacular, or even more so. This trap in the King's Gambit, I call it the rebellious child, the rebellious kid who doesn't listen to his mother. You'll see, everything black threatens, white just ignores completely. It's a very calm-looking approach from white, but in reality, it's very aggressive. Now let's look at this second variation, which also happens when they take the pawn. We'll stick to the same plan of developing the knight, and as you know, black's best move seems to be g5 to threaten g4. Here, instead of developing the knight like before, we'll place the bishop on c4. It seems like a slightly more aggressive move. Why is that? Because it's threatening the f7 square, which is a very key point. Now this is where things get interesting. When they play d4, threatening the knight, what would the rebellious kid say? Go ahead, take my knight. I don't care. I'm going to castle. I don't care if you take my knight. We give away the knight. So what happens when they take it? They're threatening to break our castling. Go ahead. We don't care. The kid would say, let's bring our knight out this way. And when they break our castling, threatening the rook, it looks like we're forced to capture, because otherwise they'll take our rook. But no, none of that. What we're going to do is give away the bishop here. Careful, because we give a check. It's a sacrifice to attract, because we want to draw the king toward the center. Why do we want to draw the king in? And why are we giving away so many pieces? Well, we can afford to do it for a simple reason. We have much better development than black. We have a queen aiming at a rook that can come in, a knight that can jump in, so we're in a much better position. Notice now that we have rook takes pawn, check, and if the king tries to escape, there would be an immediate checkmate with the queen. Therefore, the king shouldn't run away, but instead has to try to defend himself with his pieces. When he defends with the knight, we have a brutal move, which is this one right here. We'll push the pawn to e5, attacking this pinned knight that can't move. And we'd be threatening to bring in the rook and then the queen with drastic consequences. Therefore, they have to defend the knight so that if we capture it, at least they can defend themselves. Alright, here instead of capturing the knight, we're going to take advantage of the pin we've created with the rook to place our queen here, giving a check, bringing our queen into the attack. Notice that it can't be captured, as I mentioned, because the knight is pinned by our rook. This king obviously has to move, and now here we're going to take this knight with the pawn. At least we recover a piece. Now we're only down one piece here. Notice that black couldn't capture because we would come in with the knight and we'd be winning on the next move anyway. So this bishop has to move away. What black does is move the bishop away, and at the same time they attack our rook. But notice that here, instead of moving the rook away, we subtly give this check with the queen. The king can't come here because there would be a spectacular checkmate on the next move. He has to try to escape to the other side. And notice that here we push the pawn, and when the king escapes, checkmate with the knight on d5. Spectacular checkmate. Notice that here, the king can't go here because of the pawn. Here is the queen, here is the rook, and here is the queen again. And this pawn is defended by the rook. So it's a spectacular checkmate. The checkmate I like to call the rebel child mate. Many players, knowing that this gambit is so dangerous, decide not to accept it here. They don't take this pawn, which seems so poisoned. Here, many players play d6, or even knight f6 first. Sorry, knight c6 first. Thank you. Defending this pawn that we're attacking. Take a look at this game because it was played with the black pieces by a grandmaster with over 2400 elo. That is to say, these traps aren't just for beginners. They work for everyone. If a player with over 2400 elo can fall for it, anyone can. Notice that here we would normally continue with knight to f3. We're attacking this pawn with two pieces, so black has to defend it with two pieces as well. Bishop to c4, we keep developing, just normal development. Knight to f6, which is what anyone would do. Knight to c3. Here they could continue with bishop to e7, white castles, and here the best move would be bringing the bishop over here, although we're not sure if that's such a good idea because we're going to punish it. Notice that this bishop is threatening a pretty powerful threat. It's threatening to bring the knight in very strongly. Sorry. The thing is, now we always have the move h3 available, which forces this exchange that would benefit you a lot. Give me a good, cause I've been talking for half an hour. You already know it takes me quite a while to record these videos and I lose my voice for all of you. So give me a good, just like I was saying. This exchange would benefit us a lot. Why? Because we would be getting rid of this really good bishop from our opponent and putting our queen on the attack. So here, we're going to set the trap with d3 and let them play their game. Notice that this threat is pretty strong. Right now, what are they threatening us with, Chistica? Well, for example, knight takes knight. And we would have to capture with the pawn and open up the castling. Why? Because if we capture with the rook or the queen, they would take it with the bishop. But notice that here, as always, on this channel, we have an ace up our sleeve. And this ace is first to take here, pawn takes pawn. Take the pawn on e5. Notice that black will think, well, I'll recapture and keep making the same threat. Yes, it's true, you keep making the same threat, but I have an even stronger threat. First, I temporarily sacrifice the bishop. A sacrifice of attraction, but as I said, it's only temporary. Why? Because when they take our bishop, we have this wonderful move. Knight takes e5. Check. And we're also threatening this bishop with two pieces, the knight and the queen. So it's only defended by one piece. We would win the bishop when the king moves out of check. We take here, and look, let's evaluate the position for a moment. We are left with castling, better development, and two extra pawns. So here, black will often think that the only way to try to balance this position is to capture this knight. Why? Because after capturing this pawn with the queen, it becomes completely unprotected and they can recover a pawn. And at least now they would only be down one pawn. But if they do this, watch out, because checkmate is coming on the next move. In other words, they're making the situation even worse. Queen to e6, checkmate. Spectacular. I would dare to say that this is the checkmate and the trap, the most spectacular one in the whole video. While it's true that this also comes from the reused King's Gambit, meaning playing d6 or knight to f6, and in the same line as before, this one is definitely more spectacular than all the previous ones. Plus, it was played in a blindfold game, meaning both players couldn't look at the board. Notice here that we'll continue with the same line as before. For example, knight to c3, knight to f6, bishop to c4, bishop to e7, d3, bishop here, castling. Notice that we're in the same line as before. In the previous game, knight to d5 was played here, which seemed like a very good move, but we've already seen that it wasn't at all. Surely here the black pieces already knew that this move was a real disaster, and played a move that seemed much better, bringing the knight over via h5. Notice that this knight is threatening this square. We're trying to force them to make this advance here, so we can capture here under better conditions without them having the pawn to recapture and win material or something like that. And of course, we're also threatening to take here. But here, obviously, as always, we have an ace up our sleeve. And it's the same as before, capturing this pawn. Notice that before this knight was here and couldn't recapture. But now, instead of recapturing with the pawn, they can recapture with the knight. And they're still putting a lot of pressure on these squares here, especially on the f3 square where the knight is. But we, as always, have a brilliant move. In this case, what is it? Well, it's to sacrifice the queen with knight takes knight. Notice that we're completely giving away the queen. Here it might seem, no, come on, Gesture, but here it's very clear that we have checkmate. Notice that delivering checkmate is very difficult. Above all, pay close attention now, because giving checkmate here is extremely complicated. We have to be well prepared, okay? Bishop takes pawn, check. The king is forced to come here. Notice that many of you will say, yes, here's where you deliver checkmate, but you won't know how to do it. Be careful, it's very tricky. The continuation is as follows. Write this down. Bishop takes knight, discovered check. To block this check, black has a very logical move, which is to interpose the bishop between the check and the rook. But here we have the brutal sacrifice of the rook. Rook takes bishop. Notice that now it might seem normal to capture with the queen, but after this check, we would win back the queen. And then not only would we recover the queen, but with the knight we'd be defending this bishop, and we'd be left with a truly spectacular advantage. Therefore, you can't recapture with the queen. You have to recapture with the pawn. After recapturing with the pawn, we're leaving a spectacular opening here for the bishop to come in through this spot. Look, let's see. Here it couldn't come because that would be checkmate. So where does it have to go? The only move is to come over here. Now, how do we continue this checkmate? Well, by bringing in the other knight that we're missing. Notice that this mate looks a lot like the legal's mate. The only square to escape is this one here. And notice that now we're going to keep pressing with this check right here. They're going to take our knight, and you might say, how do we finish the checkmate here? If black can escape in every direction, well, notice that here the star move is c3. c3, and we're threatening this unstoppable checkmate. Who can stop the bishop from coming here? Absolutely no one. Notice that it's black's turn to play. Do whatever you want, because on the next move, I'm coming here with the bishop. No matter what you do, whether you put the queen here, put the rook here, move this pawn, whatever you do, I'm bringing this bishop here. Checkmate. Notice that it was extremely hard to finish off, but if you memorize it, this trap is absolutely incredible. Alright, now let's move on to the next spectacular trap. And, well, if you've made it to this last trap, it's because you're a loyal follower, and I'd love for you to let me know in the comments. You know, I reply to everyone, and I love seeing who makes it to the end of the videos, so if you're here, I'd love to reply to you in a comment. Let's see that in this, also very spectacular trap, we're playing with the accepted gambit. We'll continue with knight to f3, g5. You already know that's the most popular and best line for black, in quotes. Here we'll continue with bishop to c4, like in the first trap, do you remember? Sorry, the second one, where we play bishop to c4, they attack our knight, and we just ignore it. It's similar to the spoiled child trap, remember? Here they take our knight, but instead of giving everything away, this time we actually capture this pawn. In quotes, we end up a little bit better. Why? Because we have these two pieces attacking here along with the bishop. The only thing separating them is this pawn, which they have to defend no matter what. For example, with the bishop. Here we're going to play d4, putting even more pressure with the pieces we still have, like this bishop attacking here, for example. And here, what black can do, for example, is keep developing and attacking this d4 square. For what? To attack the queen, to attack this point. And we say, if you really want to take here, then go ahead and take here. We're just going to develop the knight, which seems harmless. If they take here, what will happen now? Well, obviously our star move of the video is coming, which is bishop takes f7, the classic bishop sacrifice, luring the king out, and now we'll come in with the queen. Check, we bring in the queen, the king has to move aside, and now we will take this pawn with the bishop. Notice that we're threatening to move the bishop away and bring the rook in here, checkmate. So black doesn't have much of a continuation here. For example, if they take the bishop, which seems like the best move, after rook takes, they have knight here attacking the queen, but we'll give this check here. The king can move here, but we can't capture yet because it's defended by the queen. However, we bring the other rook into the attack, and now the consequences are absolutely disastrous. Black obviously has to resign here. But in this game, black tried to fight a little longer by playing queen here, capturing this knight. White gives check, and black can't recapture because it would be almost checkmate. The king escaped this way, and now, thank you. The knight jumped into the attack, going after the queen. The queen captured the pawn, and obviously here we have 1,001 ways to finish the game. If you want, leave me a comment with the best continuation you can find, or what you would play in this position. Of course, I'll reply to you as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me a big like, because I put a lot of effort into this, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye, friends!